Hi, my name's Neil and welcome to the first of my Q&A videos. I plan to make these a regular thing. I'll be answering questions today which have been sent in to me via Instagram, but from now on I'm going to ask if you'd like me to answer any of your wedding photography questions, if you could please post them in the comment section of this video and I'll answer them in the next video. So without further ado, on to the first question. Okay, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you on a wedding day? This one is a cruel question to start with. I'm quite lucky that I've never had anything happen to me which has actually had an effect on either me or onto the photographs or anything like that, so touch wood that continues. The answer though is actually, I mean, it's painful to even think back on because it was an awful moment and a horrible feeling when it happened. But I actually had a card failure happen to me as the bride was walking down the aisle. The card actually stopped working as the bride was walking and reached halfway down the aisle. Now luckily I realised, and because I always shoot with two cameras, I could immediately switch to my other camera. So no moments were lost, but it was a horrible feeling to be worrying about whether I had lost just a couple of photographs of the bride walking down the aisle or more photographs from before that time. You know, like I probably would have been using that card for at least a couple of hours. Now luckily, and I'll be forever grateful to the photo god for this, literally no images were lost, and I was very grateful for that. It was obviously a horrible time because I realised that the card had failed as it was happening when I was looking back through the images. During the ceremony I had a quick look. I could see that I wasn't able to see many of the images from before that, but thankfully they were there. Now luckily for me, I was extremely fortunate and no images were actually lost. It's just that I couldn't actually see them all through the camera, but when I put the card into the computer, when I got back, they were all there up until the point I knew the card had failed, at which point I'd already switched cameras, so it wasn't bad. But the rest of that wedding was very difficult because in the back of my mind I constantly was worrying that I'd lost however many images. I didn't know at that point, but I say I was very fortunate. There was no lasting damage in terms of any images being lost. The reason for that card failure, it turned out, which is something that, you know, I may do a separate video on this, is that the card that I was using, which was an SD card, which I'd purchased off Amazon, was a fake. And it was something that I didn't realise when it first arrived because the card looked perfectly legitimate. There was nothing that I could tell from looking at the card which would indicate it was a fake. But it was only when I got back and started comparing with other cards, I wonder why this has happened, that I realised. And there are some telltale signs. But I say I'll probably do a video about this in the future because I think it's really important for us, especially wedding photographers. You know, we have such a huge pressure on us to capture everything so well that we can't afford to have anything go wrong with it, any of our equipment or our memory cards. So without a doubt, that was the worst thing that's ever happened to me on a wedding day. I just thank the photo gods that there was no lasting damage and no photographs were really lost, and that I was shooting with two cameras. But sometimes these things need to happen for them not to happen again. You know, like I thought I didn't realise I'd done anything wrong by buying a card off Amazon, but now I'd be extremely hesitant to do that again, just because there are fakes out there, and you don't want to go through that. Trust me, you do not want that feeling, especially when it happens as the bride is walking down the aisle. So yeah, horrible moment and a horrible question to answer, but you know, it is what it is, and I was very fortunate. What's my favourite moment to capture on a wedding day? I mean, this is really hard to answer because it sounds very cliche, but I just love so many different times on a wedding day, from the excitement of the morning with everyone getting ready to you know, walking down the aisle is a really big moment. Hope you're going to get emotion there as well. I love speeches because for someone like me who's obsessed with capturing moments and emotion, with speeches it's happening right in front of you, so I always enjoy capturing those as well. And obviously portraits. I absolutely love photographing portraits in the evening time as well. So there's so many moments, but I think if I could have to choose one, and the moment that I always think, yeah, I'm getting really excited about what this may give me and what emotion I'll see in front of the camera, it would be the moment that the bride's father sees his daughter in her wedding dress for the first time. I always feel really privileged to be there at that moment and capture those emotions, and it really varies from very quiet emotion to really full-on tears. I feel really privileged to be there at that moment because it's such an intimate, private moment for for both, for the bride and for her dad and for the family members, that you do really feel honoured to be there in that space when that's happening, and to capture that, knowing that those pictures are going to be looked back on for many years. It's really important to me, and I just feel really honoured to capture it, and it's just a privilege to be there. So yeah, I mean, I love all aspects of the wedding day, but I think if I was to use just one moment when I can feel myself like getting excited, I wonder what's going to happen, it will probably be that moment. As you can see from the photographs on the screen now, like, I've been lucky enough to capture some really nice moments between a father and a daughter, and the fact that I know that these photographs are going to be looked at for many years to come makes it all the more important, and it's really special to be there. Okay, so next question. If you're going to take one lens to a wedding, which lens would it be? That's actually quite an easy question for me to answer, because it would be the lens which I use the most on a wedding day. I would say at least half the photographs I take would be with this lens, and that's the 35mm. At the moment, I'm just in a transition from going to Nikon cameras to Sony, but the first lens I bought for the Sony was a 35mm. I love the 35mm lens for a few reasons. The first reason would be it's a lens which is very similar to the focal length which the human eye sees. So because of that, the photographs which are taken on a 35mm lens seem to look very natural. You can picture yourself being in that scene, which is not something that can be said if you take like a really lovely portrait on a 135 or a 7-200. You can just tell that that's been taken on a longer focal length because of the way that the background will often blur out. Whereas with a 35mm lens, that's not the case. It's almost as though we can picture ourselves being in that scene, and that's something that is pretty unique to the 35mm lens, I find. It's also a lens that doesn't give you much distortion. If you shoot wider, maybe on a 24mm or wider, you can sometimes get a bit of distortion around the edges of the frame, which a 35mm lens doesn't tend to give you, so that's a big bonus. I also think it's a great lens for getting close. Much of my coverage on a wedding day, at least 90% of a wedding day for me, I photograph in a reportage, documentary type fashion. And I like to do that by getting quite close to the action. And I find that a 35mm lens works really well for that. The temptation if you're using an 85 or a 135 or 7-200 lens is to go far away and just hide in the corner and take moments like that, which is fine. But I find that photographs have much more impact and feel that much more personal and emotive when you're physically closer, and the 35mm lens enables me to do that, and it makes me do that. You know, I like to fill the frame, so if I'm stood far away on a 35mm lens, then I can't fill that frame with the subjects that I'm looking at. There will often be negative space. I don't really like that, so I need to get in close. So the 35mm lens is perfect for that. I also find when it comes to portraits, that it's a fantastic lens for shooting through things and for putting things in front of my lens. So you may have seen my recent video, which I've linked to in the description, where I use my iPhone to create a reflection. Doing that works so much better on a 35mm focal length than it does on any other. So again, great for that, but also for shooting through things, for putting things in front of the lens, which is something I often do for creative effects for portraits. Again, the 35mm lens is exceptionally good for that. So for those reasons, it would definitely be the 35. Second to that, it would be my 85mm lens, but I would say I use that maybe 30-40% at most, maybe even less than that on the wedding day, but over half easily the 35mm lens. Yeah, I absolutely love that lens. Okay, so the next question, what part of wedding photography do you find the most difficult? Ooh, I might cheat with this answer and say that the thing that I find the hardest of running a wedding photography business is all the admin. So anything that I do basically where I've not got a camera in my hand, in particular accounts, keeping receipts and keeping books, I find that like not just much difficult, it's just a real chore, and that's quite difficult when you're running a business on your own and you love one half of it. It really makes it difficult to do the other half. So I'd probably say that, but I understand that is a bit of a cheat answer because I'm sure it's probably not what you meant. But if I had to say about what do I find most difficult about a wedding day, the pressure that I think I put on, and lots of, I'm sure all the wedding photographers put on themselves to try and keep on improving and keep on bettering yourself, because I find that very difficult, especially on certain days which may be more challenging, whether that's due to time or weather. It can be very hard to to create something which you feel is better than you did the last week if the last week everything went in your favour. So I think it's like the mental struggle, if you like, of making sure that you do as good a job as you can, and ideally better than you've ever done before, but on particular days where everything is difficult. As I say, like I photographed some very difficult weddings where the weather's just been horrendous, and all these things can make actually, you know, incredible images, but they also make everything very, very difficult, and the challenge is really ramped up when things like that are against you. Other things such as timings, you know, on a wedding day, certain wedding days you've got lots of time, everything feels relaxed, it's really chilled, you feel like you're doing a really good job and everything seems quite easy and you're just enjoying it, whereas other days time can be really, really tight and you're trying to get lots of different images in a very short amount of time, and that can be a real challenge. But I say at the end of the day, I think we as wedding photographers probably thrive on that pressure. I know I do. I wouldn't want to do anything different. I wouldn't want to photograph portrait sessions, because if the weather's not great on a portrait day, then we just do it the next day or the next week, or we just keep on postponing until we've got everything in our favour. Whereas a wedding day, that isn't the case. Obviously, it's, you get it now or you never will. So that's the real challenge. So I think that's probably the hardest thing, that the pressure to be better and better each week, and try and better yourself, because ultimately the more experience you get and the better we get as photographers, that becomes harder and harder. But I say at the end of the day, I love that challenge. It is difficult, but I wouldn't be without it. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question. Thank you very much for whoever sent that one in. Okay, so last question for today's video. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you at a wedding? I think there's been quite a few times that I've ripped clothes, I've split my pants before, which isn't ideal. But I think if I look back, the most embarrassing, which is, it makes me just cringe, was a time that I was working with my friend Tom Harrington. Shout out to Tom. And we were both walking behind the bride as she was walking into the church. This was a winter wedding, so it had been raining quite a lot and things were a little bit slippy. You can probably see where she's going. But the bride was walking in with the bridesmaid. It looked a really nice image. So I stayed behind the bride as they were walking towards the church. And then what I like to do is run in front to get a shot of them walking towards me, which is fine if you don't slip over a very slippy grave.
Okay. You alright? Yeah. Didn't get that, did you?
No. You okay?
Yeah, as long as I'm not muddy. Excuse the mud.
I flew into the air. I had 2 cameras on me at this time. Flew into the air, landed, thankfully didn't actually hurt myself. I didn't realise that until a while after. But I think I was just worried that pure adrenaline would see me through. But yeah, flew through the air, landed, I had mud all over me, especially my trousers. Luckily, again, the photo gods were in my favour. No damage caused to me, or more importantly, the cameras. So that was a massive blessing. I remember getting up, still going to the front. Tom was there filming this, and I said, "Oh, did you get that?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh, that's good. There's no evidence of this ever happening, other than the bride and the bridesmaids seeing this happen." But Tom was just being really, really nice, it turned out. He did get it on film. It's funny to look back on, but it was so embarrassing, because not only was it a case of me like falling in front of the bride, but I then had to walk down, enter the church, walk down the aisle with mud all over me. I remember the groom just thinking like, "What have you done?" And I said, "Don't, everything's fine, I'm fine, don't worry about anything." And then I'm just living on adrenaline at this point. The rest of the day went brilliantly. It was a really, really nice day, but yeah, that was a real cringy moment. And again, I don't understand how either I wasn't hurt or the cameras were both fine as well. I mean, that was just a miracle in itself. So maybe it helped being in a church, I don't know. But yeah, without doubt, that's the one that really jumps to mind as being like the most embarrassing moment I've ever had at a wedding. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. A huge thank you for those who sent in the questions which I've just answered. And as I say, if you'd like me to answer any of your questions about wedding photography, please pop them in the comment section of this video and I'll answer them in the next one. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you next time.
It's okay. You alright? Yeah. Didn't get that, did you?
No.